I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. I'll visit an innovative program aimed at getting young men interested in the priesthood.
Meeting guys who had the same goal, who were thinking the same things as I was very helpful to me.
A serious new movie examines life and faith in the 1960s. We'll take a look. And a tale of 3 children with a special message gets the big screen treatment.
Little children, they don't give you arguments. They don't contradict. They don't say, well, this is impossible.
Well, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us this Thursday. For some people, it's something that they've just wanted to do their entire lives. For others, it hits just like a bolt out of the blue. We're talking about the idea of becoming a priest. It's the biggest decision a young man can make, and these days, with the crisis in vocations, the need is even more urgent.
But how does a young man even find out if he has a calling to the priesthood in the first place? Well, the Brooklyn Diocese has a program called Project Andrew that's letting young men do just that. To find out more, I headed to the Immaculate Conception Center in Douglaston, Queens, earlier this week. Many boys grow up wanting to be a doctor, lawyer, or fireman, but the priesthood? That might not exactly be a dream job for a lot of young men, but many of them do feel the call. Whether or not they answer that call is another story.
Clearly, people who've come through Project Andrew come to the seminary, go to the major seminary, so in this 5 years, 6 years almost now, it's been a good experience.
That's where Project Andrew comes in. Every couple of months, the Diocese of Brooklyn holds an evening of information and support for young men trying to discern their call. So, why the name Project Andrew?
We call it Project Andrew because it was Andrew who brought Peter to Jesus. And it's the same issue. We have somebody who brings them, who recommends these young people, or some of them not so young all the time, to think about, a vocation.
Now, how was the turnout, do you think, was it pretty good?
It was hard to tell because between the seminarians and those, but I think we had at least about 15 new people.
It's something that Bishop DiMarzio says is proving effective for the diocese. There have been more than 40 Project Andrew meetings since he became Bishop of Brooklyn 6 years ago, and many young men now in seminary attended one or more of those meetings.
Before Project Andrew, I did not know what a seminary was, the program, the procedures, and Project Andrew helped me through a lot of prayer and meeting guys who had the same goal, who were thinking the same things as I was very helpful to me.
And it was the vocation office of the Diocese of Brooklyn brought it to my attention. They said that Bishop DiMarzio would be present, so I thought it would be a great way just to be able to pray with the bishop at Mass or other kinds of prayer services. And it really, it just kind of opened my eyes.
And there are a lot of things that weigh on the minds of young men considering the priesthood, not the least of which are, what will my parents think? Or what will my friends think? Bishop DiMarzio says it's that last question that keeps more young men from answering the call than any others.
They're afraid to let anybody know they're thinking about it. And as a result, sometimes they just hide it and it just goes away. It passes, it gets too late. So the peer pressure seems to be a real issue.
The bishop hopes Project Andrew can help young men overcome their fears and answer a call to the ministry.
I think the Lord takes us in down certain avenues, down certain streets for a reason. So I'm 27 years old. I'm here a little bit later than some of the younger seminarians, but I think we all have the same call.
Priests at least gave me the examples of what it means to be a priest, how much they love their vocation, and how dedicated they are to the Church of God and the people of God, and that's something I look forward to doing in my future life.
Well, the Brooklyn Diocese holds Project Andrew evenings throughout the year. The next will take place January 31st. I've actually written more about Project Andrew on our blog. Just head on over there to currentsny.net. Click on Riding the Wave. It's there on the right-hand side of the screen.
Great program. Stay tuned, though. There is more Current Straight ahead. Coming up, you won't believe which book one Southern pastor is burning. We'll have that and the rest of the day's headlines when Currents returns.
Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime. Coming up later, faith on film. Check out my interview.
But first, let's have a look at all the day's headlines. Officials from the U.S. Bishops' Conference are not too pleased with the Senate subcommittee's vote on health care reform. In a press release, the Bishops' Conference says it will have no choice but to oppose the bill unless changes are made. Among other things, the bishops say the bill doesn't prohibit federal funding of abortion. Well, the issue of marriage will be on the agenda when the bishops meet next month in Baltimore. The bishops will discuss the draft of a pastoral letter. Meanwhile, H2O News reports fewer couples in Europe are saying I do.
Hooray for the newlyweds. Unfortunately, many of today's couples never manage to take that step. There is an alarming general decrease of the number of marriages that take place in Europe. Annually, the big I do is pronounced 570,000 times less than it was 17 years ago, even though the population has increased by more than 25 million during the same period. The decline in the number of marriages has been attenuated by the unprecedented increment of immigration to Europe. As a consequence, mixed marriages, also referred to as international marriages, have quadrupled in the past 10 years. The family is still an unresolved matter throughout Europe. According to a report from the Institute for Family Policies, a European agreement on the family is urgently needed, which will recognize and promote family rights in all areas, supporting, protecting, and endorsing the family and its members in an effective way, as well as removing all obstacles that hinder it. Germany, the United Kingdom, France, Italy, Poland, and Spain are the countries of the European Union with the greatest number of married couples, representing 67% of all marriages that take place in the European Union.
Well, marriage and health care aren't the only things on the U.S. Bishops' radar. The Bishops' Conference has also announced more than 250,000 people have been reached by a new initiative to mobilize Catholics to fight poverty. That means the Catholics Confront Global Poverty Initiative is a joint effort of the USCCB and Catholic Relief Services. It's now reached a quarter of its total goal. That goal is getting 1 million Catholics to learn about and share stories of those trying to rise from extreme poverty, also to pray for the poor and to work for public policy changes to benefit the poor. Well, poverty isn't the only concern these days in the South Pacific, where recent natural disasters have devastated several countries. The latest numbers from the United Nations paint a grim picture for the Philippines. More than 6 million people have been affected by 2 typhoons that hammered the island nation in the last few weeks.
A new policy in New York on stem cell research isn't sitting well with one feminist group. Feminists Choosing Life of New York has filed a suit in state Supreme Court to block a policy that allows the use of state funds to pay women to donate their eggs for embryo research. The group says the policy encourages women to participate in a painful and risky procedure. Halloween is usually a time for parties and candy, but one church pastor says that he won't just be burning wood at an upcoming bonfire. Pastor Mark Grizzard of Amazing Grace Baptist Church in Canton, North Carolina, is also planning to burn versions of the Bible that he doesn't agree with. Grizzard says that he plans to build a bonfire on All Hallows Eve to destroy all Bibles that are not the King James Version. He explained his reason for burning the Bibles to the media.
We're burning books that are satanic. I believe the King James Version is God's preserved, inspired, inerrant, infallible Word of God.
The pastor also says well-known Christian ministers like Billy Graham and Rick Warren are heretics whose books belong on a long list of negative influences. In addition to the Bibles, he and his congregation plan to burn other Christian books he deems offensive on Halloween. And October 26th is the day talks will get underway between the Vatican and the Breakaway Society of St. Pius X. The society was automatically excommunicated in 1988 after its leader consecrated 3 bishops without the Vatican's consent. Earlier this year, Pope Benedict lifted the excommunications of those 3 bishops, one of whom, it was soon discovered, denied the extent of the Holocaust.
Well, stay tuned. There's much more Currents coming up straight ahead. Coming up, how serious is this? The Coen brothers tackle life and faith in the 1960s.
Welcome back. Well, from the Ten Commandments and the greatest story ever told to the Passion of the Christ, Hollywood has been tackling stories of faith and religion for years. And one of the latest films to do so, but in a bit of a different way, is the Coen brothers' dark comedy, A Serious Man. It tells the story of Larry Gopnik. He's a 1960s family man whose wife is actually leaving him for one of his colleagues. On top of that, his chances for tenure at the local university are being threatened, and his kids have problems of their own. For help, Gopnik then turns to 3 rabbis. The movie is told in the typical Coen brothers fashion, and for a closer look at A Serious Man, I'm joined now by Paul Levinson. He is professor of communications and media studies at Fordham University, and he is also the author of, most recently, New Media, published by Penguin Academics. And Paul, thank you so much for joining us on Currents.
Great to be back here.
Yeah, again, you came before.
Yeah.
We really like you. We appreciate it. So I saw the Coen brothers film this morning, actually, and it deals with this man's plight as we described it, and sort of the banalities and of what it takes to get through life. Tell us a little bit about why you think this film is significant from a faith perspective.
Well, it deals with an issue that was first raised, maybe it was raised earlier, but the first we know about it being raised was in the book of Job, where someone is tested, his faith is tested, all these terrible things happen to him. This happens to everyone in great and minor ways. If there's a deity there somewhere, and if the deity is good, why do bad things happen to people? And there really is no completely rational answer. You have to have faith that you're being tested.
And I think that really hits on the main cores, because a lot of what he has to go through, he seeks counsel. He goes to the rabbis. He wants to have some answer to some of the reasons that things are happening. His wife is having an affair. His kids don't pay attention to him. One of the tests that he has actually is that he's bribed by this student to give him a passing grade when the kid actually failed. And I won't give it away, but struggles with that throughout the course of the movie.
Yeah, well, first of all, the rabbi part I found delightful, being Jewish, because this is really part of the Jewish tradition, that rabbis don't have answers. Really taking, they're almost like psychologists. If you have a question, they sort of put a mirror up to the question and put it back to you. What do you think? And actually, it's a good idea because it gets you to think more clearly and deeply about the issues that are facing you, rather than giving you some kind of preconceived answer. So none of those rabbis had any specific advice for our hero other than getting him to think more about the situation. The academic part of it I thought was very interesting as well, because he was, as you mentioned, given a test there as well. I do have to say, though, of the 2 parts of the movie, the Jewish part and the academic part, the Jewish part I found far more realistic than the academic part.
Being a professor, you would know,
because of the academic part in the movie, again, without giving anything away, he's up for tenure, and there's a whole discussion about how that proceeds, and there was a part of that that was not very realistic. They asked him at the last minute, could you give us your publications?
Right.
In my world, you got to submit them a year earlier.
You would know that way ahead of time, of course. A little bit back, though, to the faith part about it. When he is seeking the counsel of these rabbis, and essentially, like you said, they really don't give him, they don't proffer any solutions or answers. What they do tell him, and I don't remember the Jewish word for it, I don't know the Jewish word, but I heard it several times in the movie, is basically to just sort of have faith or to trust in God. That's basically the translation that I got. Or, the Creator would know things that you don't. So keep on going, be a serious man, be a good man, which he had tried to do before and didn't realize that things were crumbling down around him.
Right. I mean, there's an old story which I always loved about a rabbi who is visited by a couple who tell him they're about to split up, they can't take it, and they ask him for help. So the rabbi goes to the woman first and says, listen, we know what your husband is. He's a philanderer. He gambles away his money, but you're a good woman. Just stick with him. Then he goes to the husband and says, listen, we know what a terrible wife you have. She fools around with men. She doesn't cook well. And so the couple then talk to each other, and they get enraged because the rabbi has given this conflicting advice. So they go to see the rabbi and they say, what kind of rabbi are you?
Sure.
You say we're both right. How can we both be right? And the rabbi thinks for a minute and says, you know something? You're right too. So they never give answers. And what the purpose of that is, beyond the humor of it, which the Coen brothers show very beautifully, is to get you to think more clearly about the situation. Don't look for pre-digested answers. It's almost the complete antithesis of, say, Googling today, where you can look anything up and find an answer.
And there's a solution out there, there's a response. And he was a math professor in this, and you know, obviously we think of math as an exact science, and even that was brought up as one of the things, as saying, well, no, there's no proof in the proof theory, or in the proof. It's a mathematical term. What, you know, the equivalent, if you will, of a rabbi would be like a priest, right? And a lot of times people, you know, priests will do pastoral care, and they'll hear the ails of their parishioners and whatnot. What do you think this connection then is that they would have through the human connection, the rabbi or the priest or whatever, and then to God? Is there a conduit there anymore for us, or is this telling us, this movie perhaps suggesting that there isn't anymore, that you need to have that dialogue more directly? What do you think?
Well, a very important difference between Judaism and Christianity is that rabbis are not really priests, even though we think of them as priests. A rabbi is actually a teacher, in Yiddish, a lera, someone who basically has information and can give you some general guidance, but doesn't claim to have a direct connection in any way to God. There actually were originally priests in the Jewish religion, but when the original state of Israel was destroyed millennia ago, that was the end of the priesthood.
What is the takeaway morally from this movie as far as faith is concerned and one's human's belief in God?
The takeaway is you need to have faith to get through all the vicissitudes of life. Good things happen, but bad things are going to happen. There are no guarantees. And you have to have some kind of faith that if you hang in there, sooner or later things will work out.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Paul Levinson. We really appreciate that. He is the professor of communications and media at Fordham, and media studies rather, at Fordham University. And Matt, let's send it back over to you.
All right, Francesca, thank you. There's more currents coming up straight ahead. We'll look at a movie that's got more in common with The Greatest Story Ever Told than with the Coen brothers.
We drop by the screening of a new film about a piece of the church's recent history.
Well, we just examined the latest Coen brothers release, A Serious Man, a film about one man who turns to his faith in times of trouble in his life.
And now, though, we want to look at a new film that features faith in a much different way. The 13th Day tells the story of 3 children who the Virgin Mary appeared to at Fatima, Portugal in 1917. We recently attended a special screening in the city.
We're here at Our Lady of Good Counsel Church in Manhattan on 90th Street, and we're here this evening to view a film on Fatima entitled The 13th Day. It's a wonderful presentation, rather dramatic, from an artistic point of view, very fine quality film, but a powerful message about what Our Lady requested at Fatima. And it kind of follows from a perspective of what the children, the 3 visionaries, Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta, what they experienced as a result of receiving these apparitions of Our Lady, how people questioned them, didn't believe them, ridiculed them, and even the government officials tried to intimidate them and threaten them to be boiled in oil. And these 3 little young children had such courage, they were willing to die because they loved Our Lady so much, they loved Jesus, and they were willing to even suffer that way. That's what courage they had.
The 13th Day, which is a film on the true story of Fatima, what happened in Fatima, Portugal. And the screening tonight is for Catholic leaders in the New York area, and our hope is that by presenting this film to them in this way, that it will empower them to go out into their parishes and their communities and organizations and hold similar screenings for members of their communities to help spread this message.
What do you want from me?
Of all the things said to us that day, what impressed me most deeply was her tender sorrow. She said that we must turn to God, for He is already so much offended. She spoke so gently, but with so much pain. I wanted to spread her words throughout the whole world.
Why she chose those children? Well, Jesus said in the gospel, Heavenly Father, I praise you because you have revealed these things to the merest children, not to the wise and the learned. And little children, you know, they're very simple. They don't give you arguments. They don't contradict. They don't say, well, this is impossible and so on. Because they're so innocent and so simple, whatever's asked of them, if they believe, they're going to do it readily and wholeheartedly, which is exactly what we see in the movie about the children.
Very nice film, very ethereal looking, sort of like a silent film. You know, the movie that I saw, the Serious Man by the Coen brothers, I interviewed Paul Levinson about it. That was a movie that, although it was told from the perspective of another faith, Jewish faith, it had so many similarities to just sort of the plight of men and women, of humans really, and they're being tested for, you know, different things in their lives. They're trying to be a good people and wondering where God is in all of it and how can they have faith. And I just thought it was really kind of a good movie because it speaks to a lot of people from a couple of famous directors.
Yeah, well, and you know, and going back to the 13th day as well, sometimes to maybe to find God or something like that, it takes a miracle or it takes something coming out and saying, you know, hey, here I am.
A vision.
A vision,
yeah,
right.
and he was seeking this, the protagonist in the film that I saw, he was seeking that vision. He wanted that answer. And here you have in the 13th day, like you said, you know, sort of that answer presented, and then yet sometimes still people don't believe you. So, so what's the point in all that? You just got to do the right thing, I guess.
It's not always easy, but, you know, you have to. Well, that's it for this edition of Currents. Now, coming up tomorrow, October, it's not only Respect Life Month, it's also the month of the Rosary. It will take you to a special rally for children in downtown Brooklyn.
Until then, remember, you can always watch us online. Just head over to currentsny.net, and there you can see clips of the show. Up above where it says video, you can check out our blog called Writing the Wave, and you can also meet the people who make it all happen.
Meet us all. See our lovely pictures and biographies and all that. Well, you can also follow us on Twitter. Updates are there throughout the day. Just head over to twitter.com/currentsny. Just tweet right along with us. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime. Thank you so much for watching this Thursday. Have a great night.